Hi everyone. What do astronauts, Antarctic explorers and submariners have to teach us about self-isolation, confinement, re-entry? Well, have a look at these clips.
Happy New Year to all the people of planet Earth. Thank you.
A nuclear-powered U.S. Navy guided missile submarine, 160 crew on board. Not long after, we are leaning in the other direction.
I mean, this is a 20-degree lean, right?
Yes.
We crawl through another hatch and snake our way to the nuclear reactor.
Coming through.
And we ask, who is behind the hatch?
The team back there is about 11 watchstanders, highly trained nuclear operator.
Hello world, my name is Stijn Tole and I'm ESA's research doctor here at Concordia Station in Antarctica. So Concordia Station is one of the 3 stations in the middle of the Antarctic ice sheet, operating year-round for science. For a 9-month period within this year, it's not possible for any transport to get in or go out of the station because of the extreme conditions outside.
So I think these guys can probably teach us a fair bit about confinement, isolation, re-entry. There's a lot of experience between them. There's a branch of psychology called Confinement Psychology, which I think, having looked at it, can help us understand both what's going on inside us emotionally and spiritually, but also between us during this time. Here's a few phrases that I've heard lately that are interesting. We're not working from home, we're living at work. Don't know if you get that one. There's another phrase, if someone asks you, how are you? I'm COVID fine, which is actually a different scale to normal fine, COVID fine. I'm COVID fine, which means, yeah, I'm exhausted and I don't know what's going on, but I'm fine. So in confinement psychology, they talk about 5 phases through the confinement period and coming out of it the other end. They talk about confusion and panic at the start. We remember toilet rolls. They talk about the honeymoon period, and a few weeks ago I showed a video of a mum who, at the start of COVID compared to a mum in the 3rd lockdown. If you saw it, it was a pretty funny one. Then we move into a place of resentment, and I think for many of us the 3rd lockdown has been a place like that. They talk about reunion and then about reintegration. Today I'm going to talk about the 2 phases where we're kind of at. The resentment and then the reunion. One thing to note as I talk is each of us are so beautifully and uniquely made by God, and we're all different. We will all be experiencing the same things that are going on around us, but experiencing it differently. We'll have different reactions. So there are some generalizations in what I'm saying, but I'm hoping that you recognize some of the stuff in yourself as we go through it. For most of us, with the thought of re-entry, we feel both energized by the prospect of getting past lockdown. We're excited about meetups, about hanging out in beer gardens or cafes or restaurants eventually. And the social interactions that we've missed so much, the visiting family. But most of us are also feeling concerned or overwhelmed by the uncertainty of what this new normal will be. There's a degree of apprehension about how life will look, because we realise that it won't be the same as it used to be. It's not a case of just simply picking up where we left off. Even though the setting and the environment might be the same as what we used to have, we and society and individually are not the same. Things won't be just stepping back in where we stepped out. If you're experiencing this time as difficult, on whatever scale you want to put difficulty at, that's actually an absolutely normal reaction to an abnormal environment. Where we are is not normal. None of us had prepared for this, and we're still going through this abnormal setting. We started with fear and concern or anxiety, and maybe some sense of novelty. I know I enjoyed being home for the first few months of the lockdown. Many of us experienced exhaustion. And I know for me, if you asked me 6 months to 12 months ago how I was feeling, the absolute quickest answer that came to mind was I'm exhausted. But what I've realised is in the last couple of months maybe, exhaustion is not the first word I use to describe myself. Many of us will have felt this exhaustion, found similar emotional patterns to grief. I'm going to show you a list of words of emotions that are normal at this stage of the behaviour. So as we look at the resentment phase, things like lethargy and fatigue. So it's I hear this phrase all the time. Meh is a new word that everyone's using. Sort of thing. Lethargy, fatigue, of conflict, And we hear that domestic violence is significantly up. We talk about anxiety being 4 times more prevalent in the medical system at the moment than it was a year ago. We talk about resentment, about loneliness. I wonder if any of these words, now all of these words you won't relate to, but I think you'll find a couple that are pretty strong. Loneliness, restlessness, depression. And then in the reunion phase, as we start coming back to some new normal, the phrase that stood out to me lately is anticipation anxiety. Worried in anticipation of what it's going to be like, and is it going to be okay? Am I going to be safe? Is it going to be normal? How I can't predict what's going to happen and how I need to be, and so I don't know where I stand. This anticipation anxiety. We look for safety behaviours, habituation, so creating habits of our behaviour. We talk about mood swings. It's one I've noticed. I can resonate to that one. I don't understand why I'm feeling like this or why I'm reacting. That what happened was so small, but my reaction was out of proportion, which leads to the next one, out of proportion responses and erratic behaviour. And then we talk about reverse culture shock. As we come back in, I mean, we're all watching TV shows that were made a year and a half ago where there's crowds of people all in really close proximity and it's freaking us out. This reverse culture shock that we're coming back through. I think one important element at this phase is this thing of taking it easy, of being patient, of taking rest. And so there's another thing, it's called general adaption syndrome. But what that says is that whenever there's a stress or an anxiety, there are three phases to it. The first one is alarm and reaction. So for example, we're going to be starting to go back to our office for work in the next month or two. And there's alarm and reaction to the news even that comes out. That, is that safe? Am I okay? Is that going to be all right? How's that going to work? Then there's resistance, irritability, frustration, poor concentration. But then in the general adaption syndrome, it talks about exhaustion as the third phase. And this is a dangerous place to reside in. Fatigue, burnout, depression, anxiety, and decreased stress tolerance. And what we know is that during the resistance phase, the more that we can pace ourselves to rest, to work through it, the less we will feel the exhaustion phase. The more we just push through and fight through it, the more we will get in the exhaustion phase. So there was a book written by Dr. Saundra Dalton Smith called Sacred Rest. I think it's really significant for this period, for this time. So I'm just going to put the 7 types of rest that she talks about. Some of them are easy to understand, like physical. You need to give your body rest. You need to sleep well, and you need to loosen the tension. You need to give your body a chance to rest. That one I think we understand easily. There's mental rest. I know yesterday, I think I went through 5 meetings back to back, just one after the other. I clicked end call on one and I clicked start call on another. I'm just rolling through these meetings, and then I come out buzzing at the other side and have had no mental rest through that period. Mental rest is really the best way to come to this one is, how do I actually settle my mind and be present in the moment? How do I actually work out where I'm at the moment before I jump into the next thing that's mentally stimulating? How do I give myself mental rest? And this book says that every 2 hours, take a short break at the minimum. And what you'll find is as you go to bed at night, you won't be all wound up and tense, but you'll have had these pockets of rest through the day that help you through it. With spiritual rest, I think this one's really significant. Spiritual rest is something that helps me with social and mental rest, even physical, I think, creative. For me, it's the core. There's one place I can go where I know I'm okay. And it's this place of spiritual rest where I can be in God's presence and be with Him, where I can settle into His space and take this rest. Now, the author also talks about how important it is to have purpose and meaning, and working through some of that also helps with spiritual rest. For me, I love the embrace of being with God and knowing that I'm loved and okay in that place. But we also talk about emotional rest. How do you take emotional rest? How do you... Sometimes I say I do this probably too late, but catch myself being really emotionally on the edge, and I'm like, hang on, I just need to reset. I need to take a rest. I need to take a break and give myself a breather. I need to sit down and just have some quiet for a minute, and then I'll reset and I'm ready to go again. How do you have that emotional rest? And like mental, having it periodically through the day. Don't wait and book it all in at once. Keep having that emotional rest through the day. Social rest. There are some people who give you energy and some people who take it. And for some people, being away from people is also how you find social rest. And so how do you make sure that you're giving yourself what you need that brings you rest and life? This is what we mean as a church when we say we want to create a place of hospitality, a hospitable place where people can actually find rest. And then there's sensory rest. And I think for our current time, this is a big one. How do I not just continually bombard my brain with sensory overload from screens of people trying to catch my attention and being smart about it? How do I actually give myself that sensory rest? For me, going out for a walk and listening to birds and being in that moment, turning my screens off, putting it away, going for a walk without my phone so I know it's not going to interrupt me. Sensory rest. And then creative rest. Now, creative rest is an interesting one. Part of it can be just appreciating beauty. So sunsets, sunrises, studying plants. I find science beautiful for this. But I also love just being outdoors. The sunrise on Easter morning did my soul good. That was a place of rest, of creative rest. But creative rest will also be about producing, about creating, about finding an avenue for you to actually find rest through the creation of something that you make. What you'll find here is there's nothing in this list that says sitting on a couch for a few hours and just finding a tranquilizer on the screen that numbs whatever's going on for you. That's not rest. Computer gaming, not rest. I'm scrolling through Facebook, not rest. How do you go through these 7 phases and find that for each of those, the place that you need rest in? I love this picture, I'll show you. It shows 7 different bottles that all need to be filled, and I think that's a good example of how do you make sure that for each of these 7 areas you are finding that place of rest. And so as we're in this second phase of stress, take it easy, find a way through it so that the third phase isn't so dramatic. I feel like the message that we as the church need to give to our community is let's find rest, let's find joy, let's have grace for each other as we re-enter this new normal, which is not the old normal. So I'm going to hand back to Chris, but I really want to encourage us to not rest carelessly. Work out as we go through this reunion phase coming up. When you notice your mood swings and your habituation or your reverse culture shock, your out of proportion responses and erratic behaviour, just find a way to continually be with God in His presence and rest. Settle with God. Here's two passages for you. Psalm 55 verse 22. Cast your cares on the Lord and He will sustain you. And Psalm 62 verse 1 and 2. Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from Him. Truly He is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress, and I will never be shaken.